This video accounts for cognitive perspective of psychology. It has been prepared by Kudrat Sachdeva under the given course name and application number in affiliation to Banaras Hindu University. Acknowledgement. I am thankful to the Department of Psychology, Banaras Hindu University for encouraging me to join this course on academic writing. I am also thankful to the whole team of academic writing for designing such an effective course which will be required throughout one's career. The course content also helped me to write this paper. Now, before beginning to understand the cognitive perspective of psychology, one should know what psychology really is. Psychology is the study of behavior and mind. The term behavior refers to the actions and responses that we can directly observe, whereas the term mind refers to the internal states and processes, such as thought and feelings, that cannot be seen directly and that must be inferred from observable and measurable responses. Now, coming back to cognitive perspective. The cognitive perspective examines the nature of the mind and how mental processes influence behavior. In this view, humans are information processors whose actions are governed by thought. Basically, cognitive perspective studies the influence of our internal processes on our overt behavior. Let's study the origin of cognitive perspective. Two of psychology's earliest schools of thought, structuralism, which studies mostly the structure of brain, and functionalism, which focuses more on the functions of brain, reflected the cognitive perspective. They attempted to identify the basic elements of consciousness and purposes of consciousness respectively. Other cognitive psychologists like Hermann Ebbinghaus studied memory, which is also considered to be one of the most important cognitive processes in human beings. By the 1920s, German scientists formed a school of thought known as Gestalt psychology, which examines how the mind organizes elements of experience into a unified or whole perception. They argue that perceptions are organized so that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Consider this painting as an example. It stimulated interest in topics such as perception and problem solving, but it eventually disappeared. But after several years, a renewed interest in mind emerged. In the 1950s, interest in studying cognitive processes regained ground. In part, this interest stemmed from psychologists' involvement during World War II in designing information displays such as gauges in airplane cockpits that enabled military personnel to recognize and interpret the information quickly and accurately. Computer technology, in its infancy at that time, provided new information processing concepts and terminology that psychologists adapted to study of memory and attention. A new metaphor developed the mind as a system that processes, stores, and retrieves information, and it remains influential even today. On another front, in the 1950s, behaviorists and linguists debated how children acquire language. The behaviorists, led by Skinner, claimed that the language is acquired through basic principle of learning. Whereas the linguist, led by Noam Chomsky, argues that humans are biologically pre-programmed to acquire language, and that children come to understand language as a set of mental rules. This heated debate convinced many psychologists that language was too complex to be explained by behavioral principles and instead needed to be examined from a cognitive perspective. Interest in cognition grew in other areas too. For example, a Swiss theory by a Swiss psychologist, Jean Piaget, which explained how children's thinking becomes more sophisticated with age. Overall, psychologists' interest in mental processes swelled in 1960s and 1970s, also known as cognitive revolution. The modern cognitive perspective. Cognitive psychology, which focuses on the study of mental processes, embodies the cognitive perspective. Cognitive psychology studies the processes by which people reason, make decisions, solve problems, form perception, and produce and understand languages. Cognitive psychology explore the nature of attention and consciousness and have increasingly studied how unconscious processes influence behavior. Cognitive neuroscience. It uses sophisticated electrical recording and brain imaging techniques to examine brain activity, which people in cognitive tasks is a really rapid growing area that represents the intersection of cognitive psychology and the biological psychology. Cognitive neuroscientists seek to determine how the brain goes about its business of learning language, acquiring knowledge, forming memories, and performing another cognitive set of activities. References. Following books were referred for the given material. Feedback. Academic writing course turned out to be useful in terms of imparting the knowledge required to be an effective academic writer. The course is well framed with a number of assessment questions to check one's level of understanding. My skills as a researcher are improved and my confidence is also strengthened. I think this course is excellent for students coming from my background in fulfilling their aspirations. Thank you.